Welcome, everyone. I realize we have a lot of people here, so I will try to speak as loudly as I can. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular council meeting for Monday, September the 9th, 2024. Please record the time at 7 p.m. And for everyone's knowledge, the meeting is recorded for public access and broadcast purposes, so the meeting is available and will be available online as well. With that, the first motion I have is I call the meeting to order as an adoption of the agenda, and I please want to make a note that there's an agenda addition. So prior to the adoption of the agenda this evening, we do have one proposed amendment to the agenda since it was published on Thursday. An additional item for section 10 of the agenda, closed section, permitted as per section 68(1)(I) of the Local Governance Act, which is information gathered by the police, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, in course of investigating any illegal activity or suspected illegal activity for the source of that information. And I would like to have that added to the agenda for discussion. So moved by Councillor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Thorne. Do I have questions for that motion? No questions to that motion. All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded, please note that that's adopted and added to the agenda. With that, I'll note that there are conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. Did anybody have a conflict of interest? Please fill in the form and submit it to the clerk with the reason. With that, can I have an adoption of the minutes from the regular council meeting from August the 12th, 2024? So moved by Deputy Mayor Gallant, seconded by Councillor Dettori. Are there any questions to that motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carries. Please note item number 5, the consent agenda, which we would have all received in your packages. There's the New Brunswick Department of Environment and Local Government memo regarding legislative and regulatory changes, as well as the Southeast Regional Service Commission Plan 360 Development and Building Permit List. Are there any questions on the consent agenda? If I do have a motion to accept it.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Thorne, seconded by Councillor Oblinus. Are there questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. Do I have a all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 6, I understand we have Connie Pulpitz in the audience, who is registered to speak on municipal land at 33 McDonald. I would like to step to the podium, Connie. How are you tonight?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I am well, thank you. Good to see you.
There'll be something for all of the councillors after I give the presentation. Mr. Mayor, councillors, I'll only take a few minutes of your time. Number one, I want to commend you for your foresightness in purchasing the McDonald homestead and the adjacent properties bordering on the east side of Highland Park. This will almost double the size of the upland area of the park, and I think that's you're to be commended for that. I know at the moment there are no plans for this area. And to the point, Salisbury calls itself the home of the Silver Fox, yet we have absolutely nothing tangible within the village that would visualize or otherwise show that this and support this statement in any way. And this is my request. I would ask the mayor and council, as part of the long-range plan for Highland Park, to consider erecting a scaled-down version of the very iconic Lee Colquitt's Fox Tower. Everybody knows where that is, I think, across the river at the Beckwith Farm now. I can envision information panels on the walls of the first floor, and this would give the history of the industry and its impact on the community. Any further discussion on the matter at this point is pointless because of, it has to go into a long-range plan and at that time. And I only hope I'm still around when the time comes to see this project realized and to be able to have some input. And I would like to make one further comment. Our sign says Salisbury, home of the Silver Fox. That's not true, really. PEI holds that place in history. But Salisbury is New Brunswick's home of the Solar Fox. So you might consider if the signs have to be changed before there's a delegation from Prince Edward Island that comes in. I thank you for your time this evening. And Lori's going to give you this information, the same as I've given you just now, after later.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
Anybody at council, does anybody at council have questions for Connie? So graciously given your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Okay, with that, we will move on to item number 7, reports and recommendations from committees and private meetings. None this evening. And moving on to item number 8, reports from administration, petition regarding the rezoning on Dundee Drive.
So as council knows, on August 19th, we received a petition that was circulated to council related to the proposed rezoning on Dundee Drive. In the town's procedural bylaw, we have a number of different ways that we can address said petitions, one of which includes putting it on the next council meeting, which is tonight. We thought it was important to make sure we had it on the agenda also before council considers third reading further on in the agenda this evening. So I'll stress again, this is specific to the petition, and we do have a representative on behalf of the signatories that is with us this evening. I think Melinda is the lucky one that will come up if there are questions that council can ask questions to on behalf of those that signed where the petition was received after the public hearing that we had in August. We do have some additional, essentially clarification we want to provide on the matter at hand before we dive in. And before that, we have received, in addition to the petition, a number of different emails of correspondence related to the topic. So generally, what will happen in a public hearing is we would list the names that they received. And at that point, we had one written objection. So while that public hearing is passed, we did feel it was important to make sure that this evening, for matter of public record, we listed them off, so bear with me. So written objections were received since first and second reading and since the public hearing from the following. Krista Steves and Robert Parker on August 23rd, Lily Adams on August 24th, Bruce and Marlene Matheson on August 27th, Earl and Judy Doucette on August 30th, Melinda Steves to an employee of DELG, or our acronyms, Department of Environment and Local Government on August 30th, and a number of subsequent follow-ups. Ryan Furlot on September 2nd, Sonia Levine on September 2nd, Marla Price on September 5th, Kim Gaines on September 5th, Gerald Taylor on September 7th, Shonda Allen on September 8th, and Bob and Vanessa McDonald on September 9th. The petition raised a number of concerns, as council knows, and as they received in August and again subsequently in the council package. We do want to provide, again, the following clarification. So prior to the rezoning even being considered, a comprehensive water study was completed that included a 24-hour pump test and is stamped by a licensed hydrologist. The study was done in accordance to the Department of Environment and Local Government's WSSA requirements. And since first and second reading, in light of concerns brought forward by residents directly to DELG, a provincial hydrologist, in addition to that, that completed the study, has confirmed that it is, quote, totally satisfactory. It's also worth noting that the particular rezoning that we're dealing with tonight is to rezone the property. So it's not a building permit, nor are we discussing the buildings specifically. It's the rezoning or the land use of the property and what would be permitted on site. Each building, however, including this one, will be subject to reasonable terms and conditions by the PRAC, so the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. And while we have a water study for this first building, every subsequent building, should they proceed, will be subject to a water study as part of the reasonable terms and conditions that the PRAC may impose. Further to that, on 2 occasions, the province has, at the request of residents to review, has confirmed that the project does not require an EIA, so an environmental impact assessment. The other thing that's important in relation to these provincial confirmations is that these are in addition to confirmations that had already been provided. As part of any rezoning, we have to, I shouldn't say we, Plan 360, the planners that handle the files have to essentially communicate to a number of different provincial departments to offer the opportunity to provide comment, if any. Another element that we feel important to address is that we've received several requests that essentially inadvertently request that the town consider what we call people zoning, or requiring the zoning for particular demographics, which we cannot do. At the end of the process, of any rezoning process, should it pass in any rezoning matter, a planner has to stamp and send it to the province to be registered to certify that we followed the Community Planning Act. And that would not permit things what we call like people zoning. And the other element, there were or have been public concerns raised around, quote, low income housing. We'll stipulate that the developer is proposing for market rentals with a portion of the rentals deemed affordable by CMHC, which is not the same as for public housing, generally what we would know it as. And regardless, we will also state that the town has a number of diverse, dire needs of housing across the entire housing spectrum, and we have an obligation as a municipality to explore all of them. The petition and subsequent correspondence also calls into question wells at Highland Park, which is important to clarify. 2 wells were drilled a number of years ago that did not have sufficient casing and collapsed, not due to inadequate water, but due to the manner in which they were installed. The 2 wells that are currently there, that we would call the active wells, in addition to the one feeding the splash pad, one feeds the washroom, which yields 10 Empyrean gallons per minute, or IGPM, which is not a low yield well, and the second one is used for future use, whether that's the washroom splash pad or to have another line that's there as well. The proposed development being considered this evening, as council knows, would provide a secondary access to Dundee. So this is currently marked and has been for a number of years as what we call a future street, which means that it's a strategic and priority connection for the municipality, which is essentially to ensure that the existing subdivision has the secondary access, which is particularly important for things like emergency vehicles. And the reality of, as council also knows, of the cost of anything, whether it's asphalt, sewer, what have you, is that the likelihood of seeing this future street connection happen without increasing the density on site is what we would probably say is unlikely. I wouldn't say impossible. I don't think anything is quite impossible, but would definitely be unlikely. And then most logically, the property is adjacent to existing VC zoning. So village center zoning, which is what the proposed amendment would designate this land as. That includes the school, obviously immediately next door, but it also includes just around the corner, existing rental properties on McDonald Drive. And we have also, to a further point, received correspondence on replicating that type of property or that type of building on this particular parcel, which actually today would not be permitted. That's zoned as VC at the top of McDonald Road, not all the way down, but at the top it is zoned VC, which is what this particular parcel is being proposed to be zoned to with one of this evening's amendments. And the petition this evening also alludes to the location being ideal for seniors, so close to drugstores, post office, local businesses, etc. And the proximity to services, not necessarily specific demographics, but proximity to services is essentially the essence of the argument for making it a good contender to extend the existing VC zoning. There was also reference to the school. We've reached out to them, and like any private home that's on a well that doesn't have a generator, in a power outage, they do have to close if it's for a prolonged period because they can't pump the water. But they've mentioned that rarely do they close due to water issues, and when they do, it's typically related to their equipment. We've also had questions related to previous zoning bylaws or previous developments. It's important to know that we're dealing with a current zoning bylaw which repeals any previous zoning bylaw as part of that process. The amendment would also match multi-unit lot requirement or lot size requirements that would apply in unincorporated areas. So former LSDs in our case. And as we discussed on October 12th, there's no accepted subdivision plan for this particular parcel. We discussed on that meeting or during that meeting that there was proposed developments nearby. While they were single dwelling homes, we can't really compare them apples to apples, but we will state there was a water study, although it was an abbreviated one, that was completed at the time that did not show any concerns as it relates to water quantities. I cannot personally speak to the decision of council at that time, but the outcome as council's received in correspondence at the time was that a number of property owners along Dundee purchased portions essentially in their backyards to their backyard to their property, and the development did not proceed. We cannot, from staff's perspective, reasonably recommend decisions to council that counter the determinations or the conclusions of licensed professionals, in this case, hydrologists, in the absence of being engineers ourselves, which we will not profess to be. We do, in this case, have, again, to stress, a comprehensive water study that's stamped, which anyone that knows the engineering world knows that does come with significance, stamped by a licensed hydrologist, and further to that was vetted and given the green light, for lack of a better term, from a provincial hydrologist that works for the public sector as well. We have to essentially make our recommendations on the basis of these reports, which were done in accordance to provincial guidelines. We are not the only municipality or community that follows these guidelines, and again, would rely on the input of experts. And for lack of repeating myself, each subsequent building will be subject to a satisfactory water study as well, as part of other terms and conditions should buildings proceed at the PRAC level, so the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. So the water study is one element. So with that, thank you for bearing with me, but I'll pass over to council if there are any questions, and if there are questions for any of the signatories, we'll ask Melinda to come up. But the recommendation on the floor for this section, again, we're only discussing the petition, not the bylaw amendments. So the recommendation on the floor is to accept the petition as received, just as a formality for record. And then we have a proposed letter that basically covers everything that you just had to listen to me go through, to send to the signatories as well. So I'll pass it over to council if there are questions for the recommendation on the floor.
Do you want the recommendation first or the questions?
I would do the recommendation first, then we'll consider that part of the debate. Yeah.
Well, I'll move that council receive the petition as presented related to the proposed rezoning on Dundee Drive and direct administration to send a response to all signatories as drafted for additional clarification on the rezoning.
Moved by Councillor Florence, seconded by Councillor Bannister. With that, there'll be questions for the motion, which will be included. If anyone has questions for Melinda? Are there any questions for Austin?
Can you, Austin, just for our residents that are here, can you just explain their involvement in the PRAC process for when it does go towards, I know we're talking zoning tonight, but when it gets to the actual development process with PRAC and how their involvement can.
So it would follow any, the PRAC process is similar for any, whether it's a variance or conditional use like this, temporary use would apply. So essentially, it almost mimics the process that would have happened with this to advertise the public hearing. So as opposed to notifying residents within 100 meters of the property, the PRAC will notify within 60. They meet on a monthly basis at the end of the month. It's usually the second or last week of the month at the Service Commission building. And so residents within 60 meters will receive that notification, and just like they are able to at a public hearing, have the opportunity to speak. At that point, depending on the matters, so if we use this one in particular, if the PRAC wouldn't happen if the proposed amendments don't pass, but should the proposed amendments pass and it get to a point where the development proceeds, at that point, the property will be zoned accordingly. So they will be discussing reasonable terms and conditions. So it's buffer, confirmation of the water study, drainage, parking, what else? There's one more, isn't there? There's 5. They have a series of, and they could consider anything else that's, again, a reasonable terms and conditions, but they would have the opportunity to write in to the planner that's working on the file, or to make a presentation to the PRAC directly.
Just want to clarify, you mentioned the building is at the top of McDonald, or that this rezoning. This is essentially rezoning. We're not talking about individual buildings tonight.
yeah.
But it is a rezoning, very similar to some respondents from the public that brought forward about a couple of units that are at the front end of McDonald. So essentially, if residents that had written in, that some did write that they were in support of that type of a thing, this type of rezoning would be required and still have to go to proper governance.
For anything that matches at the top of the street, yeah, yeah. Right now, that building at the top of the street would not be permitted with the current zone.
I have another question.
For me, yeah.
I don't know if you know the answer or not, but, I know we said that the EIA was not determined to be required. Am I correct in saying that the water study still would have been the same type of water study during an EIA?
Yes, the EIA would look at,
Additional thing is that
yes.
They would involve, but
Yeah.
water study wise.
an EIA doesn't,
The same. water.
yes, they would still use the provincial guidelines. Yeah, they would use the provincial guidelines, correct, yeah. And the other element is the EIAs are triggered, they have basically a list of different elements. The one that would be triggered in this case would be quantity of water consumed on a daily basis. So the EIA branch has a number based for bedrooms, which is not triggered in this case for the proposed development. And in the WSSA or the Comprehensive Water Study Guidelines, they also have a per occupant calculation, which is more stringent than the EIA guidelines or calculations. So in this case, should there be an EIA, they would likely request I don't know, it's speculative for me to say what they would request, but they would request a water study if they deemed that it was going to yield more water on a daily basis.
I do have a question for, if there's no more questions for Austin. I have a question for Melinda. In the audience. Hi. How are you tonight? Thank you very much for coming forward tonight. I did have a couple of questions. So I understand you had a petition that you took around that we've gone through. I thank you. I just wanted to confirm, because I mean, I know that Austin did clarify and talk about it. Seen a lot of with receiving correspondence from individuals that received the petition that talked about one 34-unit building. As the petition went around, was it very clear to people that this is not one 34-unit building?
Yes.
That we've been receiving emails on, and that this is tonight, in fact, just a rezoning of the land, not about individual buildings that will need to go into crack, and it's indeed only one building with 8 units?
Yeah. I had the drawing with the 5 buildings on it. With the one from the meeting.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It just, I'm very confused on why we be receiving, you know, emails about the one building with 34 units, and that 34 units will be being built with 18 out water, which is not the case.
When they're all done, they will be
Right, but
2, 8, 3, 6.
if each is approved, but that's not the same as what. That's why I was just curious on. My second question is, just to confirm, were the residents aware when they were signing the petition and giving back to the individual buildings with the 5, that each one of them would require a comprehensive water study?
Yes, that it would only be the 1, 8 that would be built first.
And that each one after that
Yeah.
would have to have it.
She was very good.
Okay, perfect.
Asking the right questions. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda.
Any additional questions from council?
I have a question.
I have one too, so.
Yes, John?
I'd like a show of hands just for curiosity's sake. Who is here because of this rezoning? Please raise your hand. Of all of you who've raised your hand, if the town had a current water facility, town water source, would this still be an issue?
No,
No.
probably not.
No.
So
Yeah.
it would for access.
Yeah, no access, there's no sidewalk,
So,
traffic's gonna be
But
crazy.
it's going to school. Yeah. But in general, the water is the main issue.
Right.
So therefore, if something could be done for water, maybe not necessarily immediately for this particular development, but in the near future to try to address that issue, would everyone be more amenable to this particular development?
Yeah, I was good. Let's see the rules of the, we have, please, everyone, the rules of decorum, questions have to go through Melinda.
Okay, I did watch a lot of your council meetings, and I watched the one in 2023 when Anglo made a presentation.
Yep.
About the municipal water, and she said it would be at least 8 years if you sign the agreement today.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, if those buildings get built and people's wells go dry, we can't wait for 8 years.
Absolutely, and I cannot dispute that particular point, but that is for the entire town water, for the entire town.
Right.
It's not necessarily this particular area if there is a water issue in that area.
It didn't, when I watched the whole thing, it
I
seemed
understand.
as though the water had to go up to a water tower first.
Either a water tower, either built somewhere in the area of the big stop,
Yeah.
and that would be either a local water source that we could find, or one that would hook onto either the Moncton City.
It appears as though the local water source isn't going anywhere because you,
Remains to be seen, but at the moment, no.
at the moment, because you,
They've
there's
done
3
some-
locations, nobody granted you access.
Exactly.
And your own hydrology report says Salisbury is built on mudstone and is not conducive to high yielding wells.
Absolutely. Fair enough. I can't dispute any of those things.
So
Now,
you have that.
the other problem there, just the fact that we don't have access to the land to do some of that testing is a problem. Because of some landowners have decided they do not want to have the water tested in an area for one reason or another. Which comes back to property rights. These people would like to not have this development built in their area. This is the same problem we're having here in terms of this particular development. That someone who owns this land would like to make a development on it. And people do not necessarily agree with.
We would like him to follow the existing zoning and he could build what is permitted for that zone. He bought that land.
Please ask only. I do apologize, but that is the rules of the
That it
council.
was zoned residential, single family
Absolutely.
duplex.
And I fully understand that.
And now he's
they
trying to impose his wishes.
impose the
change
problem.
it.
He would like to change it. He's applied to us and he has not given us any reason not to change the zone.
About the test that he did, the water test was done on May 15th during groundwater return, which the environment says it shouldn't be done between March 15th and May 30th.
Fair enough.
I can speak to that one too, just so we can address that. So if you read in the next line in the WSSA provincial requirements, it does stipulate that year over year, it changes. And so it's dependent on the particular year. And so in the WSSA report that we've received, it addresses the precipitation over the preceding period before the pump tests were completed, including the weather state, the most close weather station, meteorological, basically precipitation counts. And so it stated in the WSSA report that the precipitation would not have affected the results of the conclusions, I should say.
Did they look at the groundwater from their well in Smith Street? They have observation wells all over the province.
DELG,
Yeah, and their water level for the end of March was record high.
So they-
Record high.
they looked at basically the stations where Environment Canada measures precipitation. And I can't speak to if they looked at that particular like monitoring well, because DELG was not doing the study. It was the hydrologist that was doing the study using that information that I just referenced. But given the fact that DELG's given their stamp, I would assume that would not be an issue. And I know that particular monitoring well they have was brought up to them, and there hasn't been any concerns
Can I
raised.
say that we're still waiting a response from them? He
I-
forwarded to their 2 other, from the EIA branch
Yeah.
and to his director, and we're still waiting. for a
We
response.
We have a response.
You have the old response, but not since the new information.
I'm not sure what the new information is, but we got another one last week that says the determination for an EIA stands and it's not required
But there's,
from an EIA specialist.
there's been more since then.
We have the 2 confirmations from
you have on
What date is that?
I will look. We can keep going with your questions, Councillor Dykstra, while I pull those up.
You might as well go fill us because I can get my train of thought. Sorry.
I just want to go back to the original question with the petition, because there's lots of signatures on here. And I just want, for clarity, I want to know, with the signatures that are on here, was everyone provided a letter with all the concerns? as they signed it, or was it just the preamble?
No,
This is
the
what-
letter that's attached to it was with it,
That's what I wanted to.
and it was read.
Perfect. Perfect.
Everyone was talked to. It wasn't just sign this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if?
Not-
You're not allowed to.
What if
There
the
was-
wells go dry?
There was a public meeting, everything was discussed with for Melinda.
Speak up.
So, just to go back on, oh, sorry.
Just to address that point, because that is a valid point.
Mhm.
If the wells go dry today, who is liable for that?
Nobody's liable because they haven't been put under undue strain.
Absolutely. But right now, today, that is not specifically the town's responsibility to ensure that your wells are all going to work.
No,
perfectly.
because you haven't put us under undue.
Absolutely. So I just want to make that very clear because the town is not responsible for
No.
anyone's wells. That is your, as a private owner, landowner, that is your responsibility.
Mhm.
Hands down.
But you do know that there's problems because you all discuss it in the meeting. Six
No.
in Counselor Glantz have gone dry, like you all.
It's not that there are problems, is that a town water source would be a big benefit for the town, for the residents of the town. People would like to see that done. Fortunately, the costs are astronomical. Hands down, but that's for the full town water system. Those costs are not cheap. And that has to be spread over a long period of time.
No,
Why that?
no.
So,
Why that? That tells what it is.
so the response from the province, just so I can respond, was from September 3rd from Mr. Suma, who the original correspondence went to.
Mhm.
And then on September 6th from an EIA specialist, which is Patrick, who Mr. Suma referred it to. So I can't speak to, I don't know if, I would assume they're gonna provide a response. I'm not sure to you
Yes.
directly, but
That's what I said.
I can confirm that that's the correspondence that was forwarded to us.
So when you had a comprehensive well test done at Highland Park, right?
Awesome. Sorry. Yeah, I
You had-
didn't know, sorry.
You
Yeah.
had in 2021, you had a comprehensive well test done there. And the hydrology report concludes that the geologic formation upon which Salisbury sits is classified as mudstone. It's not conducive to high yielding well. So how Salisbury sits on that kind of ground, why are we considering putting in units that are gonna have high yield?
So I'll start again by saying I'm not a hydrologist, so I'm not gonna profess to know the geological formation, but
Well, that
if
would
you
be
look in the
really-
WSSA guidelines again from the province, you'll see that that's a standard piece that they have to include. They have to include what the geology in the area looks like. And so in that case, in that hydrology report, if I just mentioned earlier that the well in question yields 10 imperial gallons per minute, which is not deemed to be a low yielding well. The minutes in 2021, I think, were from March 21st. After the initial submission at the time, they did step-down tests or drawdown tests, they're called. One was, I think, 4 days after that meeting, like it was very close. That's when they yielded 10 imperial gallons per minute on the well. That's
But
what
we're talking about all of Salisbury here, not that one. particular
They're
one.
talking about the region, which
They're
is
talking about-
standard, which is
it says-
standard. There would be something similar in this WSSA as well, because it speaks to the geology, which isn't site specific, obviously. So they have to speak to the geological formation in any area that they're conducting a water study in.
And that study was, high yield wells for our own municipal source, like for sourcing the. entire-
No, I think you're speaking
No.
about the ones at Highland Park, right? Yeah, that's at Highland Park.
Because you couldn't get the water for the splash pad.
No. Like I clarified, it wasn't for that. There were 2 wells that were drilled. They were drilled at cost. And there was insufficient casing, which they collapsed. So it wasn't a water issue. It was a structure issue with the wells. And then the other two are the ones that had the report done, which is the one that you're referencing.
Now, can I say about when Anglo did the presentation here to you about the municipal water? And she explained to council that you wouldn't want to do water testing when there's a lot of groundwater infiltration, so that you are not overestimating the quantity of water there is. You actually want to do it when it's pretty dry, during low groundwater conditions, when you know that the water quantity can be sustained. But he did his water test on May 15th in the spring, when March 29th had the highest groundwater in Smiths Creek, which is the closest observation well that the Department of Environment has to Salisbury. So it's not about rainfall, it's about groundwater.
Yes, and again, I will not profess to be a hydrologist. I'll start with that again, but the
This is
The-
the employee you hired to advise you guys on.
Where's your code of conduct?
the
I'll ask these people in the gallery. I do understand the motions here. We have the addressing coming from. Thank you.
So the WSSA requirements are clear in that the hydrologists that are stamping the report have to state if they're taken outside of those time periods, which was done in this WSSA. With Englobe's presentation, it was on feasibility study for a source, Councillor Deputy Mayor, sorry, Galant's point, for the entire municipality. And that was, I don't know specifically exactly what she was speaking to at that section that you mentioned, but
I was talking
at the
about
point
you
she was
guys would
speaking
be doing
on
well
undertaking a
tests on your-
geophysical survey. And we were looking at a couple of particular areas, like you mentioned, a couple of different zones.
No,
And
it was in general too, when you
Okay.
guys would drill a test well. When I believe you had asked the question about when it would, how long the whole process would take.
Mhm.
And she said, well, it depends on, when you get started.
Which avenue we take.
And she said that you wouldn't want to do it this time of year, which was in the spring, and you had said, or you wouldn't want to do it in August when it's really dry. And she said, no, actually, you would want to do it in August when it's really dry, because then you know what your bottom level is for sustainability. You do it in the spring when the groundwater's high, that's only telling you what you're gonna have when the water's high, right? Not what you're gonna have like right now, when the grass is brown and people start to get sediment in the water.
so for that feasibility study, it was for, again, a feasibility study. We didn't engage them to, I think it was you that mentioned, or maybe Councillor Dykstra, we didn't engage them any further based on landowner input. Had we have done that, they would have done, I suspect, again, not a hydrologist, but suspect the same thing that was done in the WSSA report. They would have had to follow those requirements. So in the study, especially where they would have to do a municipal system, they would have to state what the precipitation conditions would have been at that particular time, which was not part of the scope of the feasibility
She said
study
you would
at all.
wait. She said you would get everything ready, and then if it wasn't the right time of year, you would wait until it was dry so that you knew you had a sustainable source. And I think it's the difference between when a developer's paying for their own tests and they want a certain result, and when the town wants the real result. They want to know, like, if we're drilling this well, we're trying to supply the town, we really want to know if it can do it.
Now, it's a valid point, the August testing period, but August of last year would have been a horrible test if you're trying to draw down things as tight as possible. So
She wasn't specifically saying
But-
August. She was
but
just saying you don't
each,
do it. in
each season is
February.
going to be different, because each ground recharge will be different, because it's all based on precipitation levels. Now, are we getting more drier in general? Maybe. Is that just a short trend that will all of a sudden become alleviated in the near future? Who knows?
Well, the Department of Environment states December, the middle of March till the end of May, and October to the end of December. It's not recommended by them to do well because of ground recharge.
I think the other thing is that we're dealing with a feasibility process of an entire municipal water
Right.
source as opposed to a WSSA report for
An
a
individual
proposed
zone.
rezoning.
For an
Yeah.
8 unit.
I mean, you're clearly going to be way more careful if you're drilling for an entire town and investing like tens of millions of dollars and the impact that it could have. There's a big difference between that and one unit with 8 apartments.
I just want to say, I have no interest in seeing any homeowners' water impacted by any development, regardless.
No.
But.
And neither do you,
No,
quite frankly, you do not.
we live there.
Exactly. In general, no one wants to see their neighbors impacted.
Right.
Not the goal of anyone, to be a good neighbor to whoever is nearby.
Then you have to go up the low risk route. If there's a low risk route, which is bringing down the density. We're not saying don't put rentals there. We're not against rentals. But why does he have to push it beyond even what the VC zoning is? You even have to increase the lot size for VC zoning as it stands today. He couldn't even build that on a VC zone, that same size lot. That is not a big lot.
Do we know how many single dwellings we fit on that lot right now? Is it 6 or 7?
Depends on, yeah, it depends on where I'm not sure. It depends on.
There was a drawing, there's a drawing, and with the road and the current minimum sizes, 7, because of water. It was changed in 2006.
And that, I guess the reason I brought it up is just that if we don't rezone it, that development can go forward right now. Dwellings can
Yeah.
go forward right
With
now.
the same water.
Or seven,
Without a water
With
study.
7 wells.
or 7 duplex.
Correct.
With 14.
14 wells without a water.
Which is more than,
One well per. you
So I
can
guess-
put
which
two
is
wells
still
per
more than
duplex.
what the 8 is that's been proposed.
So it'd be 7 wells, but the number of people would be way lower. 7 houses with 4
But
people.
I think that's the part, like, for me, the only thing that is making me feel somewhat comfortable is that we're not approving 34 units.
Once you
You're
change
given,
zoning,
you're
We
going to
are-
change the zoning.
I'm gonna share why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling right now. It's right now, I can go in and develop and create 7 homes
Yeah.
with 7 wells
Yeah.
without any of the,
And
any input from the public in any.
nobody's worried about.
That is more wells and potentially more.
No,
No,
it's-
hear me out. I'm just trying to, my heart is this big. Like, I'm hearing everybody. I'm just trying to share my perspective.
Yeah.
Right now, it could go forward without any input from the public.
Yeah.
Without any consideration from council on the wells, with an abbreviated water study, not a comprehensive one. Right now, if we rezone, if we rezone, I know, I'm shaking my head, I'm sorry. I'm just sharing my thoughts. If we rezone right now, we're just approving the rezone. The next step is potential development, which could be 1 unit or 1 building with 8 units in it. But you can't guarantee that. With 1, we can't guarantee right now somebody won't build 7 homes
it's
with 7 wells.
proposed. Apply for the
7
proposal.
houses would be with 7 wells.
100%.
That land
So I think
sustain that.
for me, what makes me more comfortable is the dwellings are smaller because they're apartment size unit. There was a comprehensive study done, which is good. And they need to redo all of this for any other development.
The water use, when you count 4, according to the Department of the Environment's website, what you have to figure out per bedroom. Now, I do know that the development at the meeting was said 3 bedrooms on the top floor. And somehow that's got changed. I don't know how, because when you gotta figure out water yield for your water test, you have to count the bedrooms, and now there's only 2 bedrooms. I expect there'll be 3 bedrooms when it's built. One is called a den now. I expect it'll have an egress window, and there will be children or people in that room that were not blind.
People per
So-
unit, like there's 8 in this unit. That was
So when you calculate the water usage per bedroom, when you do 2 8 units, 3 6 units, and how many bedrooms are, it's 4 times the water use that 7 houses would take with 4 people in it.
Amen.
So it's 4 times the water use. So you get, yes, there's 7 wells. Just like she has a well, and she has a well, and he has a well. Nope. Right, that's normal. You have a well, you have a well, you have a well. We all have wells. But we don't have 34 units in a small space with like over 110
building,
people.
only one.
I
building
think that's
It will be.
not
No,
necessarily.
After comprehensive studies are done.
Not necessarily.
water usage is gonna be based on the amount of people.
It's 8 units.
The water
All we have
study
is
is
the study.
based,
And we can't tonight, we just want to be very clear to everyone, and thank you, Councilor Colwell. Like we are considering a rezoning, whether it's the units consideration for the top of McDonald, the first building, should it go forward, because it still has to go to PrAC for that meeting. Anything subsequently after that, maybe single unit houses, we don't know. Just,
Once he gets his own.
you still have to have water, you still have to run water regardless, we don't know.
Why would you consider keeping the zoning the same with a variance?
Again, I can't speak for what's going to occur after, you can't do the variance for that.
You can't do a variance for, well, not for that big, but you could tone it down and maybe have like at the top of McDonald's, you've got 3 units.
The individual will have to come forward after the first building with, again, a study with the proposal on what they want to do, which will have to go through the same
Okay, so-
process.
He said that he's gonna build first the one that's way over on an angle. Right? That was the first one that he said, obviously, so he doesn't have to build the road. And so he does that building, people move in. Water, you've got all this other space all messed up. Trees are cut. He does another water study. Oh, I guess there wasn't enough water for all these other units because it was done in May. Then what? Then you just got one building sitting kitty corner on a lot and just a bunch of mounds of dirt, when if the full study was done and you could put 7 houses in there, you'd have a nice development, or 7 duplexes, or some of those little garden homes. You'd have a nice development instead of bigger building off on a corner.
Those townhouse, it'd be the same problem, would it not?
No, the ones on
Victoria
McDonald
County.
Road, no, the ones on McDonald Road, let's just say, they have 1 person in each of those buildings. Only a couple of them have 2 people. So your occupancy is low for water use. But when you're doing 3 bedrooms on a second floor, you're not gonna get seniors on the second floor. So you're gonna get a mom and a dad and 2 kids in this bedroom and 2 kids in that bedroom. And then on the weekend, when the boyfriend comes over with his kids, then you got like 8 people in the house. plus-
But Melinda, you did actually indicate what we've been talking, what Councillor Cole talked about, that he could very well, after the first building, not get a water study that allows additional development. That is the protection that is in place on this.
But then you have a messed up development, when you could have just individual houses in there, because
But that's not to say that the individual, if he does a water study that can sustain individual units, that would.
so now, do you really think that there's not enough water to sustain 7 houses? But you think
Again,
there's-
what I'm indicating is that the protection is there on the water studies.
No, we don't feel protected. Then you won't feel protected. So you might say it's being protected, we don't feel protected. None of my emails.
Can't even do their laundry already.
Yes.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna address on Melinda.
So we don't feel protected. And we don't really feel like you're doing your due diligence. You feel you are? We don't feel you are, because if you look at your code of conduct, you are the stewards and decision makers, and all counselors shall respect and adhere to established policies. And then you look at your municipal plan, it's called land use policy. So your policy is, it is a policy that existing single dwelling areas within the village are zoned to protect low density. How is this protecting that low density area?
That in of itself is a relic of the past. Low density
This,
is not, it's not the goal for every.
this
development.
municipal plan was 2021.
I'm not disputing that.
So you think your municipal plan and your code of conduct,
No, I'm not.
Really?
I'm saying that low density is not always going to be the goal with all development.
it's still in your,
I'm sure that's the goal in general for the town of Salisbury, because that's what's been developed in the past.
it doesn't say, it says this is the code of conduct, which is a law. It's a law. It's not a suggestion. You are the stewards and decision makers, and all counselors shall respect and adhere to the established policies, procedures, and bylaws showing commitment to performing their duties and functions with care and diligence. And then when you look at your policies, it is a policy that existing single dwelling areas within the village are zoned to protect low density residential areas. How is this protecting? that low density area?
I'll jump in on that too, just because there is a process. If there's a code of conduct complaint, we're not addressing that this evening. We're addressing a rezoning. In this particular case, we're addressing a petition. If you look at the code of conduct bylaw, it stipulates how a complaint can be submitted. The first step is not to discuss it in public at an open meeting like this. So there are clauses in there, and so
You are protecting low density. How is it protecting the low density? Pretty
the
high density.
relation to the municipal plan was addressed by the planners. I'm also, like, I don't profess to be a hydrologist. I don't profess to be a planner either. And so they made a case for the extension of the existing VC or village center zoning. And that was addressed by the planners. So, and it's also, some of the principles of that are also addressed in the petition itself.
It was very weak. It was that it was next to it. So it's next to it.
There are other elements.
BC.
There are other elements like that it will maximize existing areas within the serviceable boundary. There's multiple there in close proximity to existing comparable developments like on McDonald Road. It fills housing needs that have been discussed as well. So there are other elements there that were highlighted, but I digress. I will leave it at that. And I did not write the report, and again, will not profess to be a planner to write
I
said.
mean, you can't just go back on everything and say, that's antiquated, that's old, that's.
I think it's important to note that municipal plans every day or rezonings happen all the time. That's why the PRAC is set up as a independent third party to review them, to keep council in check, to make sure that we're not doing things just for the money or just, that's why PRAC exists with members of our community and communities of all of Southeast. So I think that
Why do we have that?
the municipal plan is set up as a standard, and then there are adjustments that can be made because towns change and villages change and
Goals.
and needs. And I believe, I'm gonna keep speaking because I'm allowed to do that. I believe that we have done our due diligence. We've checked with every professional that we possibly can, with hydrologists and engineers and planners. I think that we have done our due diligence. on this.
But the only thing is that most of the people here didn't even know this was happening.
It was well advertised.
If you know that, most people don't even know that you have a website. They're like, you mean on news and.
Well, that,
But you put a notice on the doors for fireworks. Every one of us gonna know this. There's gonna be fireworks. Your dogs might be upset.
That's due to complaints.
Well, you're getting complaints right now.
So I'll speak to the notification process when we get to third reading. I go through the public notices, the dates that it was shared on social media, the dates that it was posted, or printed, I should say, in News and Views in the town's newsletter. So I can tell you, while I will not profess to be a hydrologist or a planner, I can speak to the fact that I manage communications for the largest municipality in the province, and regardless of the issue at hand, we're going to hear that, right? So we can make our every intentional effort to communicate as much as possible to residents. And in fact, I would encourage everybody in the room and tell everyone that you know to follow the town on Facebook, consult the website, sign up for the newsletter. They are great sources of information.
But if you had have just taken the same effort that you did with the fireworks notice, a truck went around, you dropped those on all of our doors, we all would have been aware. Not one of the things that came out said 2-story. So as soon as people heard 2-story, that's like a lot of people. Everyone heard by rumor that it was just gonna be the little town ones like at the top of McDonald. That's what they heard. And so it didn't raise any alarm bells. It's like, oh, some of those, that would be great. No problem. Then it's like, oh, 2-story, 3 bedrooms on top? 34 units, that's a lot. And when you go look at the land, it's not big.
Now, I will add to this that right now, and I don't know if I'm supposed to exactly state the numbers, but we have knowledge that the Lions Club would like to build a new facility, new villa at some point in time in the future. Because they have over 90 people signed up looking for housing.
Right.
Housing fundamentally is an issue not just here, not just for low income, for seniors who are in need. Housing is a need across the board.
So it's water. So is water. yeah.
It goes hand in hand. Absolutely.
If-
And there's no intention of trying to steal your water to sell it to somebody else living here. That makes no sense to anyone. We're not trying to devalue your properties. We're not trying to, we try to make sure that you have to be evicted or haul water in. Though I agree with your concerns, because quite frankly, I would be concerned as well if something, water usage is moving next door to me.
Right. So you're supposed to vote with empathy,
Hmm.
like you were living there.
Yes,
Put yourself in our shoes. So
absolutely.
if the developer wants to do what's best for the community, like if he wants to be a member of this community, then why doesn't he build what's needed there? What you just said, there's a long waiting list for seniors,
I think the waiting list for these units is long too.
Yeah,
which is longer.
That's not for us to say. This developer
Well,
owns the land. It is their land to do with as they will, with the current zoning as it is, I understand.
With the current zoning, he could do. senior
Absolutely. Not disputing that. I'm assuming there's a business case to do something else, otherwise there would not be
Yeah,
any
the more
interest.
money, the more people you put in.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with the developer. I'm not really that familiar with the development other than.
You're familiar that 30 units gets more money than 14. I get all about money, all about money.
But where my problem comes from the fact that this is the owner of the land that would like to do stuff that they own, that they have the ability to do it, and they are the owner.
But he bought it in this zoning with the knowledge that this is
Yes,
what's allowed on
And
that.
so far from what I've seen, there is no reason we cannot zone the way he would like.
Really?
Yes, at the end of the day, we have a recommendation from planning. Hey,
Councilor, please on the floor. It's Melinda or the council speaking. please.
we have a water study that says there's satisfactory water. We have a recommendation from planning to say to go forward. We have, this aligns with our strategic plans that we've set up as a town, and it meets the needs of our housing. So I don't have any fear in moving forward because we have all of these protections in place, and I don't live very far from this.
We live for,
Not really, I'm probably no further away than the bottom corner. Just up on Veterans.
yeah, you're there.
Yeah.
100%. Like at least, at least, maybe. not.
Already a lot of.
So you don't like the empathy, eh? It's not giving you the empathy.
But, well, like, we,
Yeah, I'm gonna remind everybody again, and I do appreciate the passion, I really do. We do have rules of decorum in the council chamber, and we have invited Melinda to speak on your behalf. I do understand how frustrating it is, but we cannot have we had an open session a few weeks ago. That
We
was-
didn't know about it.
Again, it was published, and
Not everybody has Facebook. Not everybody's online.
again, that will be addressed by Austin.
Yeah.
And again, thank you, Melinda.
well, to that point, that the two wells were drilled on that property. I think it goes back to, as I said, it depends on who's paying for the test. It's no different than anything you have done. You have an appraisal on your house. Who's paying for it? The buyer or the seller?
I really don't think the hydrologist cares who pays him. It's the same fee.
Nor
right?
the provincial
no.
hydrologist.
Right.
That begs the question, how much is a water test, this type of water test to be done now? How much would it cost to have done? To do it? Does anyone, do you know, Austin?
I don't know this one specifically, no. I know that an estimate that we were given for, when we asked to compare for another project, completely unrelated, was that an abbreviated study is around 2,500 and a comprehensive one can be around 15,000 plus the cost of the wells. I am not saying that's what it costs for this. I have no idea.
So the problem that we have is that two wells were drilled on the property, right?
Mhm.
And they were 91 meters and 87 meters deep. Those are really deep wells. Those are way deeper than the people's wells down there. They all run around 60 meters deep. So they're not in the same aquifer as those wells, is what I was told by the department. But the test well that they monitored was in a house on Main Street, which is 260 meters uphill, and it was only 19 meters deep, which is like the shallowest well I ever heard of. Like 19 meters is like really shallow. So they said when they did the pump down test, just as they expected, that didn't affect those. that one, because they were only 19 meters and this was 91 meters.
Mhm.
So our feeling is that some of the houses that are down there, closer to the site, that are more like 65 meters deep, would have been the more appropriate test wells to monitor, because they're closer to the aquifer that they're pumping from. Because when their wells fail on that street, they're not gonna drill again at 50. They have to go down to 91. Now they're in the same aquifer.
The,
So the question is, the wells are there. Why can't another pumping test be done this time of year, not in the spring, to see if it comes back with the same result? Using-
Can we ask a request for that?
I'm not sure if that, I would assume that can be considered at the prac level as a reasonable term and condition. I'm not sure. I mean, I think at this point we have a satisfactory water study, which is the piece that we have. The other element for,
It does not sound satisfactory.
the,
I don't think that's much to ask.
I'll also just, like, for clarification, just the comprehensive piece involves obviously the drilling of actual wells on site.
Yeah, there's.
But it also involves looking at, so an abbreviated study just looks at the well logs. And so the comprehensive study looks at the well logs and uses the pump test. So, the well logs, and I'm gonna say a number, I'm not 100%, I think it's 100 meters is what they use in the vicinity. And whatever the hydrologist deems necessary. So if it's not 100, it's a different number that they deem necessary, but I think it was the same number as the public hearing notice, coincidentally. Not like that was before the public hearing notice, but they looked at the well logs for the wells which would be on existing properties,
Yeah.
within 100 meters. So they look at the depths, the average yields, what have you, that would have
It's
been
online.
done.
You can go on and put that.
Yes,
that
yeah,
deep
yes,
in
yeah,
100
yeah,
meters, and I
yeah.
looked at how deep the average ones were
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
They're nowhere near. 100
So the hydrologist did that too as part of their assessment and analysis. So I just wanted to make sure that
So
was
a big
clear.
part of the cost was drilling the well. So the wells are already there.
Exactly.
So the pumping test is not the big part of the cost. So considering everything that's been brought up, I don't think that that's a big ask. To say, do that pumping test again now, this time of year, not in the spring, and monitor one of their wells nearby that's closer to the same depth. Not a 19-meter well.
I agree with what you're saying. I don't know if can we ask for?
The PRAC would have to, as a reasonable term and condition, the matter, so the petition that we're accepting is there's no decision there, it's just to accept it. The rezoning itself is to modify, to amend, elements of that, none of which deal with the water study specifically, so.
No, I-
Postpone the rezoning
That
until the water. test-
Wouldn't come until, so it wouldn't come until, like, there's a subdivision, something, when he wants to actually build it and it goes to the crack.
What do you mean?
That's when they could potentially ask for a second water study.
Yeah.
Like,
Right,
it
yeah,
has
they
nothing to
could,
do with what's happening. today.
No,
Right.
The zoning wouldn't matter, because if a second water test shows that it failed,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
So they can have it rezoned all they want.
So could you able,
That was the point, the prac is the next step.
but
Yeah.
if the test came back that it can't support high yield, then why would you rezone it?
And then you gotta rezone it again. Like putting a cart before the horse.
there is, I don't think it's like putting the cart before the horse, because the rezoning couldn't be processed until there was a comprehensive water study complete, so I'll clarify that. There is always,
But even if we do rezone it, if the water study shows that it does not support, it wouldn't matter if it's rezoned or not. They
Correct.
wouldn't be able to build it.
that's right, because the PRAC would not, yes.
That's
It's a moot point.
Council can, like, there was a question Melinda mentioned on postponing it. Yes, it's an option. We need a motion to, but that's not at this point. It would be when we consider third reading, but it is, council can pass a motion to postpone the reading. But we would, the PRAC will not take a reasonable terms and conditions discussion until the property is zoned correctly, because they couldn't impose reasonable terms and
But it
conditions until
wouldn't
the
need to
property is
be
rezoned.
if there's not enough water. I will say that this is the first time I've ever talked to any of you besides Foster, because I never got one reply to an email, except you replied and said, thank you for your concern. I look forward to the meeting.
I got,
Nobody
I
answered.
just got one.
So this is my first chance to even talk to anybody.
My caveat to that is responding to every email I receive
No.
is not tenable.
No, 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 I said you did. How about just the first?
But that, I'll speak for council as a whole. We can't respond to every single email we get.
No,
This is the venue for these questions
But
to be
I'm
dealt with.
grateful really that we're not allowed to talk to you, only to take questions from you.
Because, we've already spent close to an hour on this particular issue as this. We're not even done.
Yeah, I know. This is very important. This is not talking about a flag, or we're not talking about, we are talking about people's lives. Like, you cannot live in a house without water.
Absolutely.
So it's not a small issue that can just
No one
be.
is minimizing or diminishing your concern. That's why we're all here letting it listen. Because it is a concern and it has to be addressed. There's no dispute from anyone here for that.
So would the option be to table the vote? Request the builder to do this test in this time of year when the groundwater is lower? And test some of the wells nearby the house that are closer to the same depth, not 19 meters up, why they picked that line, because then nobody was like, what are they doing?
I think the one piece on the, just because you referenced you weren't allowed to present, the reason is because in our bylaw, if anything requires a public hearing, a statutory public hearing, which any rezoning does, there's a legislative process for that, right? We have to ensure. We have to ensure.
Not bylaw of.
So I'm.
Excuse me, sir. Thank you very much. But
the-
I have asked the gallery to please allow us to speak through one. Thank you.
So what would be the harm in tabling this and not making this decision tonight until that is done? What is the harm?
So the process wise, it can be postponed. It would, like I mentioned, happen later on when we get to actual third reading.
Right.
Council can pass a motion to postpone the reading and definitely until a subsequent meeting until we request that be done. Generally, it will be done at the PRAC. I think right now, today, we have a comprehensive water study that was vetted again by hydrologists and our recommendation, the PRAC's recommendation to consider the amendments stands. So I think just for the record, I'll state to council from a process perspective, should council wish to postpone it, it would happen at section 9.1, where we consider the actual motions to amend it. But I would say are there other questions on the petition specifically for that in particular? It's definitely, like I said, an option, but wouldn't happen at this particular point.
Well, it just seems like the hydrologist would know the department's rules for not testing until the end of May, but yet did it anyway because the result is more likely to be favorable. He could have waited another couple weeks and been within the regulation. No red flags. He did it in the right time. The groundwater was what it was. They make those rules for a reason. It is springtime. It's not only rainwater that affects the groundwater.
And the same regulations state that it can differ from year to year and that hydrologists that complete the studies need to explain if it's outside of those parameters, which was done. And I would agree that yes, the hydrologists would know the provincial regulations, but I would definitely suspect that the province would know their own regulations, and they've confirmed that they're totally satisfied with the.
But the
with the study
groundwater
that was
well,
completed.
like when you look at that Smith's Creek well, when you put in the month, it doesn't show like the month of March, doesn't show till May. So it takes them a while to compile all that information into that study.
Can I ask a question on the hydrologist? Is a hydrologist like an engineer that when they certify and stamp, they're, and not even liability, because, I mean, we have a situation in Moncton where we have an engineer that has 26 buildings that her stamp is substandard. So I guess my question is, in this situation, the hydrologist is certified to, respect the parameters, and is it like an engineer's
It
stamp?
is an
Okay,
engineer, yeah, so they are, like the hydrologist is a PN, so professional engineer, and it's the PN stamp.
Perfect. So
Yeah.
I guess in my industry, we, we have to look to these professionals to certify and keep regulations.
Because they don't follow the rules, and you get somebody else to do it.
But they do follow the rules because there's a code of conduct for them. It's like an accountant, it's like a CPA or, you know, I mean, they have boundaries that they have to. So I guess for me, I'm not a hydrologist, but I respect or have to respect the information that is given and certified by these people.
It's no different than whoever the village got to put the 2 well casings in at the park collapsed. They didn't do it that good, did they?
But
No.
that would be the contractor
And
that,
not professional engineers.
yeah,
They were
so
not.
we all hire.
They don't know anything.
Make mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we just move on?
Sure, all we want to do is make sure this is an mistake.
The motion's already been made, we just need the question.
Yeah.
I have to go back to Stephanie's statement and the fact that we are all, our due diligence is, we have to respect the professionals that we engage with and have the education and certifications, because we don't around this table. We have to rely on these people. And I don't know if there is a professional engineer in the group here, but I'm not one of them, but I do know that the regulations that they have to abide by are very strict. And they do become liable. This individual in Moncton has lost her, she's no longer an engineer because she's failed in some capacity. So to your point, there is liability back on these professionals.
Yeah, like the.
Oh, she was wrong.
I-
Have no water.
I'm not disputing that, but I guess we have to hire out these jobs and rely on the information that comes back and the fact that they have executed the task in their.
Water test.
But what
I
would be
just
the
think-
harm? What would
I
be
just,
the
I
harm?
need to say one thing, I'm sorry. Austin keeps saying it's a comprehensive water study, but it's not, it's on one building. And in the report, the Environment Canada, it says that they do a comprehensive water study, it's for all
That-
proposed projects, which is 5 buildings. And if you want to,
We've already indicated that it's not for 5 buildings. It was stipulated several times during the building,
They
during the
say that a
meeting,
comprehensive well.
but
study-
not for all 5 buildings,
No, but
our
to be
comprehensive.
comprehensive,
correct.
it's
To be
for the,
comprehensive.
to be, but this has already been addressed. And again, tonight, we are not talking about the 5
We
buildings.
need to talk about
We're
it.
talking about
because-
rezoning
because
of
our
the,
wells could go dry.
again, part of the process, which will be explained, however, when it does come to a vote. Part of the process is it does go to PrAC afterwards. So
if you did the pumping test again now, it could mitigate all of that. It could be for nothing, or it could come back good. And we would have peace of mind.
And I think that is a valid thing that we have to
Right.
explore.
Right.
I agree with you.
So.
If it's possible, I'm not promising
Well,
anything,
if
I don't know.
it's possible, the well's sitting there, all they do is put someone.
So isn't that what the process will be? If we rezone, and then there will be a certified.
So we didn't process the rezoning at all. The planners did not want to process the rezoning on this parcel until they had a comprehensive water study, because to save the time and process of going through all of the steps. Because if the comprehensive water study that was done said there was not sufficient water,
Mhm.
then there's no sense going through the
Right,
rezoning.
exactly.
And so the request was made to have that undertaken
Okay.
before the rezoning was processed
So
at all.
back to the point that we could have, somebody could just go and put 7 wells there right now, build. And
All water.
whatever. Okay, so then we go to, the other option is the development goes ahead. There's this 1 8-unit facility that's built. And then he would have to go to the next step, which would be a complete study again.
For that.
And then these people are concerned about the mess that would be there if he wasn't allowed to build again.
We have to just be like a bunch of
Okay.
trees that would be
Okay.
down and you'd have a building off.
Don't we have a bylaw?
But we have a bylaw, or we could have some sort of contingency in there,
Clearly, don't.
Austin. There could be contingency on.
So we,
enough.
right now, there's one parcel right now. As soon as you get to a second building, a subdivision process is started. So
Okay.
as soon as you subdivide the land, when it involves a public street, it's a different type of subdivision, type 1, type 2. So in this case, the town has an agreement with the developer for said subdivision because it involves a public road. So there are generally elements in there that relate to things like phases. If it's done like the subdivision plan, we'll speak to that, or we'll show that, I guess we'll speak to it. And we would be able to put elements in there as well. That's done as an entirely separate process because it's through a legal agreement that has to go through council.
Right.
At the point of the second building. Right now, it's one parcel, so there's no subdivision there.
Why does it have to be pushed through so quick, considering the feedback and the pushback that you're getting from concerned people who live with this water? Like, they're not hydrologists, but they know they can't do their laundry. They have to take their laundry somewhere else. They're not hydrologists, but her well went dry twice last year. Like, you don't have to be a hydrologist to know that when you turn your tap on, there's hardly any water.
So who's liable when people's wells do go dry, or?
The homeowner.
The homeowner.
It's the homeowner. What about the counselors who sign off on?
You can just ask your
it?
question.
Who is confident in their. Do you think that it's reasonable that the people, the ones who have to pay for this, that are in their pocket, when people are already struggling paycheck to paycheck most of the time, do you think it's fair that people gotta spend $12,000 of their own money? Or do you guys think that you should, levy some of that accountability?
We do not now, because we do not have a municipal water source. There is no liability from the town for it.
But why put that?
That is something
It's
that is
such a
being
high
considered
risk.
and
It's
will
high
hopefully be done.
density. It's like, I guarantee, like you said, oh, I don't blame you. I would be totally concerned if this was in my backyard, and every one of you feel the same way.
Yeah.
If this was in your backyard, would you vote?
And that's
yes?
why it has to be done correctly, or the.
You would
even
still
have
vote
to-
no. It wouldn't have even got this far. The developer would have came and you would have said, no, this is not.
I have
Thanks,
a couple
Nicole.
of questions. It's okay.
Yeah.
One's for you, one's for, I think. And I've already said this, my heart was big for everybody because I'm feeling it.
Why are we listening to the counselors' feelings and not the feelings of the population?
Again, sir, we had a public meeting. I do respect your opinion. By law, this is not open to the public to discuss this. This is why, out of respect, we did ask Linda to come forward and speak on your behalf. We are following the process.
I did say I'm feeling it, because I'm hearing it, I'm getting the emails, like I've walked through your community, like it's not going on deaf ears, okay? My question would be more, I'm gonna ask you first, if there's a follow-up question, but if we rezone this to the new zone, does any development require comprehensive study?
I don't know what you mean.
If it's rezoned,
Yeah.
so the rezoning is a rezoning. It has nothing to do, the development is the second phase, which is another public process.
Yeah.
We're talking about rezoning, which would allow senior homes, any
Yeah.
type of that type of development. If it's rezoned and somebody chooses to develop unrelated to the current development, would a comprehensive water study be required?
Not necessarily. So the trigger for, in this case, for a water study, comprehensive or not, is that it's multi-unit. So our zoning bylaw references that anything multi-unit needs a water study by a licensed professional engineer. In this particular case, so VC zoning is basically all the kind of this downtown core area. There's businesses, there's vacant lots, there's multi-units, government buildings, that there's a variety of different uses. Those would not necessarily require a comprehensive water study. I'll use the fire hall as an example. That's VC zoning on the front. Doesn't require a comprehensive or a water study at all. The difference in this case is that there's a condition on the proposed amendment, which is that it's limited to residential purposes. So that can be duplexes, single units, multi-units. So if the developer decided to do single units and duplexes, then a water study wouldn't be required. If they choose to do multi-units, then it will be required at each phase of the building. So we won't see any other intended use on that property, even if the amendment passes, that could be elsewhere in BC. The amendment would be conditional on only being for residential.
But if you agreed to do single and duplexes, it doesn't need rezoned.
Correct,
That's
yeah,
the
correct,
zone.
yeah, correct, yeah.
Would that be?
We also wouldn't have water studies, right? And I
We
think
don't
that's-
have water studies. It's no different. It's not different than if a house, there's a vacant lot beside you and a house goes up. You don't, I want a water study. Like, whole house going up. It's a normal risk. It's a normal risk. This is an abnormally high risk to put that much. 4 times the water use. It's 110 people possibly. There really could be more. That's a low estimate. Because we don't know what happens with the price of rentals, you know, and blended families. And so 4 times minimum. That's a lot more water. That's the
But
risk.
that's if they pass the subsequent water test after the initial development. They still have to pass after that initial development, build a first building with 8 units.
Right, if he cuts in the
Which would be
spring.
the same, with the same amount of units if it was
That's
just done
the
as a
spring when the
subdivision.
groundwater's high, but when everybody starts using the water, it's too late.
No, unless I misunderstood, well, after that first building is built, they would have to do another water test.
And if he
For
cuts
each-
it in the
Each
spring,
consecutive one.
if
What
he
she's
cuts it in the
saying is
spring, again, it would likely come back. We have lots of water. And it wouldn't be until we have a dry period that everybody's wells would start failing. The test was good because it was done in the spring. Outside of the recommendations of the department. of Environment. Why do you think they made those dates? We didn't make those dates.
It's a valid concern.
Like,
I think
why did that-
it is definitely worth trying to figure out if they can be done.
Why did that hydrologist and that developer say, let's test it right now?
I
The
wasn't-
well was drilled in December.
Yeah. They don't.
I don't care if people are evil like that. I feel like they have an underlying MO.
No, can I make a suggestion that we move forward because I think everyone's made their points. I feel like we're hearing the same thing over and over again. I'm not saying that those points aren't valid and need to be considered, but unless there's some new information that we haven't received today, or there's any other questions that need to be asked that haven't been asked, we need to move on.
We can do it unanimously if that's the will of council, or we can do it formally with a mover and seconder to call.
Will that test be paid for by the government? I did read that a lot of this, half the road is being covered by for $20,000 a unit, up to so much, well test and all these things. Is there anything been said that the well test is gonna be covered?
So that was, I assume you're talking about the residential incentive program. So that was a proposal made to council. It has not passed, nor has any commitment been made on this particular parcel or development.
No, it could be.
The town will pursue if council decides to continue with that. We're still in conversations based on some of the requests. If you are familiar with the meeting, there were follow-ups that had to be done. So we're still in conversations with the consultant on that, Stantec, who made the presentation. And then if council chooses, they'll pass a bylaw on that. And then through the subdivision agreement process, if the project is eligible, that would apply. But right now, that was exclusively a proposal, and it's not passed or in effect. So I can't speak to that for the specific development. But yes, to your point, there was a proposal made to council. We haven't assessed if this project is eligible with that though, because that
Will be covered.
a portion of it could be, yes, if it's done, there also would have to be a retroactive date because
But
those things
we
are
are
done.
especially paying for the test through our tax dollars. We would like to make sure it's done within the property.
We didn't pay for this test that we have now. No.
No, but it might be covered.
The,
You're saying it might be, it's on the
It-
table that it might.
it could
covered.
be.
Yes.
for future ones, not this one,
Future
not this one.
ones.
Yeah, for future projects, yeah.
So all the
Um,
future ones.
This couldn't be backdated.
So
yeah.
and then if if the other ones came, you'd only have to notify 60 meters. I mean, the 100 meters didn't even notify anybody, so nobody would know when the other ones are coming up. Like 60 meters, that's like not even the,
I think if we have issues with the Community Planning Act, there's a provincial election coming up. It's a provincial piece of legislation.
well, no, that's
So
not really true. The village could commit to saying, we will put notices, because this is a bone of contention here, we will put notices on your door like we did for the fireworks.
council could consider that as part of future amendments, absolutely. But right now we follow
A
the.
lot has happened because
Goes unpunished.
I didn't have notice. So-
I always say that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't think it's the council
Yeah.
walking door to door.
Yeah.
So I don't think any.
Forget about the dogs next time, please.
Can I call for the vote?
Like move a motion, I move a motion just as a formality.
To do it again?
No, to
To accept.
to move that we call for the vote, that we end debate and call for the vote.
Oh, so I move that we call for the vote?
I just wanted to say,
debating.
Melinda,
Okay.
you've answered your question, as much as I don't know.
What is the motion? This is the
What's the motion?
petition itself.
To receive the petition.
Petition and, everybody who signed it gets a letter.
So we have a
explaining.
mover to move, to end debate, call for the vote. We need a seconder,
I'll second that.
seconded by Glenn. So all in favor, of the.
All in favor to end debate?
Uh,
Now we need to vote. Accept the-
No, so now we're back on the original debate. So the original motion, sorry. So the original motion is to receive the petition as presented and to send the correspondence.
Can we ask the clerk to reread the motion?
What's that?
Can we ask the clerk to reread the original one? Just so we're all.
Okay, so the council received the petition as presented related to the proposed rezoning on Dundee Drive and direct administration to send a response to all signatories as drafted for additional clarification on the rezone.
So there was already mover and seconder, so
Yes.
now we call for the vote on that.
Any questions to the motion?
Yeah, will that include the email responses? We didn't. Or the email?
No, no, because, well, there's some that we have to follow up on from a staff perspective, that have matters that are related to things outside of the petition or outside of the rezoning that we'll follow up on, but, we'll keep those as records. We can probably verify that everyone that sent emails were signatories. I'm quite confident that they all were, but we'll double check before we send. Yeah.
So this is sending a mail out
Yes,
to
yeah.
all signatures
Of
on
the
the petition?
yeah.
Okay.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried. With that, we'll move on to item eight, under item number 2, the Q2 financial update.
Okay. So council received the council report for the Q2 financial update as of June 30th. Apologize due to vacations and stuff. It's a little bit later. It should have been at the last meeting, but as of June 30th, we are halfway through the year and we are at a 59.3% of anticipated revenues and 44.6% of budgeted expenses. Council will see a significant change with the Q3 update, as it will start to include summer programming and capital projects that began in July with bills received and paid starting in August. Staff, reviewing the project cash flow and anticipated invoice claims schedules to ensure that this does not present any issues when we are preparing progress claims to funders once the August progress bills are received and verified by design consultants mid-September. So the service area overview of expenses as of June 30th are as follows. General government is at 37.8%, protective services is at 50.2%, transportation services at 50.1%, environmental health services at 34.4%, public health services is at 45%, environmental development services is at 42%, recreation and cultural services is at 58.8%. Fiscal services is at 27.6%. With regards to the utility operating fund report as of June 30th, the percentages of the budget spent is as follows. Salary and expenses transfer at 41.8%. Administration, general, other is 97.5%. Collection systems, which is repairs and maintenance, is at 11.4%, lift station is at 60.6%, treatment of disposal is 775%, billing and collections is at 33%, interest on long-term debt and principal long-term debts are all confirmed debentures and are scheduled to post, so they're periodically during the year. and capital funds account transfer can be completed or will be completed at the end.
The motion on the floor, but questions?
Could I get a motion?
No, no motion.
No
on the
motion.
floor.
Any questions?
For
Diane?
information.
Do we have anything that was budgeted that we don't anticipate getting to this year?
Not yet.
Not yet.
There's some that will more than likely be transfers to reserves to be used in early 2025, mainly the municipal building. So that is, we have funds for that we expected to have to split over multi-year anyways. But just based on the fact of where we are, we're September, we had to wait for the fire hall to be tendered before we engaged the same crew on the tender package. And then in an investigation of preparing said tender package, there was an issue that had to be addressed before a tender package was prepared. So we're a little bit later than we would like to be. So by the time we get a tender out and award a contract, and get invoices and then have the 30 days, it'll probably be in the new year. So the next financial update will have that too, because we'll show where we're at with the projects and the money in from our funders. But other than that, there's nothing major. There's some that are over, some that are under, as there always is in certain accounts, but that's the main one that I would say that we don't foresee utilizing.
I had a quick question about the money that the beautification committee donated.
Mm-hmm.
So when they donated money I don't know if it was donated or they just decided not to use their full budget, but they had been like, oh, I'd like to use this for Christmas lights. That was their.
I know it.
Yeah. No, I'm just wondering if they had any like specific things that they might want
They've
that money
already-
to be used for.
They've already spent some.
Okay.
So of that donation is the fundraising money that they had. So it was a volunteer committee that had done fundraising with those trees and the different programs. And so, because basically we were doing most of it, the larger stuff. So, new benches, new garbage receptacles, they did some extra flower gardens, things like that they are requesting. So it's pretty much
Yeah.
probably be spent.
Okay.
What, because they asked specifically for.
They asked
benches along Main
specifically for
Street,
certain benches
Okay.
and, yeah.
which were
Yeah,
purchased.
yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's awesome.
So my question is more moving forward in terms of, I know we haven't set a date yet, at least I'm not, I didn't get an email around our date for budget discussions. That's still for late October that we're planning to do that?
Yeah, so we're just waiting on the province. So last year they sent out a helpful schedule at the start of August. They have not yet. That gave a confirmed date of when we have tax-based assessment. So right now we're working on some assumptions. Last year we had some contracts that were being negotiated, like garbage, snow, things we were waiting on numbers on. That's not the case this year, so we can make some assumptions on tax base, RCMP, those sorts of costs that go up year over year. We have the Service Commission's draft budget, so we'll continue our.
Really nice. I heard their draft budget was really nice.
So we'll continue our work on the draft budget to bring to council based on those assumptions. Service Commission will come to present a specific, like Salisbury Service Commission expenses in September at Committee of the Whole. That kind of starts the formal budget process. The full budget will be presented at October Committee of the Whole, ratified in November at our regular council meeting. And somewhere in between there, based on that date for tax-based assessments, we'll have our budget booklet for council's deliberations.
Okay.
So there's been no, it's like RCMP potential increases.
No, not yet, but we always use 5% as a magic number. We're hopeful. We haven't heard that the collective agreement will present any more issues.
That's why I was wondering,
That-
4%.
Yeah, the province alluded last year that was one and done. I've seen stranger things.
That's why I was worried.
Sometimes that one doesn't come until November
That's the one
11th,
we're waiting
like,
for.
yeah. So, there's nothing, we haven't heard anything on what those numbers will.
The portal's not even open yet.
Yes. Other questions on that one?
No additional
Good
questions?
job.
All right, so moving on to item number 9, bylaws. Third reading and enactment bylaws to amend bylaws number 50 and 51.
So, as council knows and was spoken to earlier, there are bylaw amendments on the table. As with any rezoning matter, it's subject to a rigorous public process. And as I referenced to Melinda when she was speaking, I we have the dates of when different notifications and steps in the process were held, just to ensure that we can give a summary. And they are as follows. So on June 24th, introduction by Plan 360 occurred at Committee of the Whole, which is essentially a 4-direction update to set the date for the public presentation, public hearing, and to send to the PRAC. On July 8th, we had said public presentation. On July 24th, the PRAC held their meeting, which recommended to council to approve the amendments. On August 7th, we had our public hearing. On August 12th, we held first and second reading or readings of the proposed amendments. And then as referenced pursuant to the Community Planning Act, properties within 100 meters were notified in writing via mail of the application and the public hearing. The town published notice of the public presentation on its website on June 25th. Following the public presentation, we published a notice on the website on July 9th that included links to the preliminary presentations that have been made to date by Plan 360, the proposed bylaw amendment documents, and the formal public notices in full. Information and the links to the public notices were also included on the town's Facebook page on June 25th and July 9th. The public hearing was also advertised in the August edition of the Petitcodiac News and Views, and notification of intent to have third reading was included in the September issue. And then notice of the public hearing was further sent via the town's monthly electronic newsletter to all subscribers on August 2nd and on July 11th. And then the meeting, or the reference to the meeting this evening to consider third reading, was included in the September newsletter edition that was circulated last week. As referenced, the recommendation from staff and Plan 360 through the PRAC to pass third reading of the proposed amendments stands. And I will stress again that this consideration is to rezone the property. Each building to the proposed maximum 5 will be subject to reasonable terms and conditions at the PRAC. As Councillor Caldwell asked, involves a notification period within, or a notification process within 60 meters of the property. Involves a monthly meeting whereby residents have the opportunity to write in or to present to the PRAC as well. Most importantly, I think based on the input that we had, the reasonable terms and conditions will look at a water study for each building. And the first building as well will also be subject to the PRAC reasonable terms and conditions process should the amendments proceed. So I'll pass over to Diane for the logistics. I think our recommendation is on the floor and still stands. So we can go through the process there, and then should council have amendments or alternate motions, we can discuss that when we get there.
So if council so chooses to move forward with the bylaw amendments at this time, there are 3 resolutions to pass, given that there are 3 resolutions or 3 amendments actually being proposed as part of this process. So given that both first and second readings of all 3 bylaw amendments were given readings in full on August the 12th, this third and final reading can be done by title only if council again so chooses. We can do each one at a time.
So there's recommendation on the floor for a mover and seconder, or to move.
I'll move that council of the town of Salisbury have third reading and enactment to approve bylaw number 50-1, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 50, being the Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan.
By
title only, sorry.
Moved by Councillor Dykstra, seconded by Councillor Oblias. Questions to the motion?
Is there any harm in tabling it?
The decision for council.
Would there be a rezoning? We'd have to start over.
Not if we're not amending, not if we're not amending the essence of the motion, which is wouldn't be sent to the province for registration. But there wouldn't be any, it would be the same thing if we ran out of time in a meeting, right?
There is a length of time, I assume, before.
It wouldn't be expired.
Okay.
So, John, are you proposing an amendment?
It hasn't been seconded. It hasn't been seconded yet. Obviously, it was
Yeah.
seconded, so
Yeah.
if it was, we need a friendly amendment.
That's not a friendly.
No.
Not a friendly.
No.
It would just not move.
Yeah. We could have a motion to amend, but it wouldn't initiate the same.
We don't have to. bring that initial motion.
No, because if we vote to defeat it, then there's a time period. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we have a motion to amend.
I need to know what the amendment is
Right.
too. Yeah.
I guess I want you to say more about what your question is. Like, if you're postponing it, you're then gonna go to the developer and ask for another water study? Are we paying for a water study? Like, what's your thought?
Well,
process?
and that's the question. What is the possibility of asking for a water study done this time of year versus demanding one versus paying for one? What are their scope and capability of what we're able to do?
For me, sorry.
I think it was the pump test because the wells are,
Well, it's already clicked, exactly.
Melinda made that comment.
Yes.
The pump test being done within.
But I would expect that we employ a hydrologist to evaluate.
Yeah, if we were gonna do it, it would have to be another hydrologist, for sure.
And is the town,
Is the town paying for that?
yeah, and
Well,
there's other-
And that's why, just exploring what the cost of doing a secondary test for this time of year, whether, not necessarily the comprehensive full $15,000, whatever the exact cost is.
that is the pump test though. That's the pump test.
But there's an abbreviated test.
That's,
But it
that doesn't
doesn't-
look at the test. That looks at the well logs. Yeah.
Abbreviated is essentially just looking,
Just looking at well logs.
It's a
Yeah.
paper test, basically. There's no ground disturbance.
We already
But
have
the
a
well's already
test
there.
that's satisfactory, that the Department of Environment has looked at and said they're happy with it.
Somebody with a doctorate of engineering in this has busted.
This company that's, I just looked this firm up. He has 33 years of experience in this field.
Who? Oh, the hydrologist, yes. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry.
And in every aspect, not just in water. I mean, he's clearly, this professional is certified. So in doing an amendment, what is your goal?
My goal to me is that if this particular test that was done can stand to scrutiny in terms of this time of year, then it should not be an issue.
So do you not think someone with 33 years of experience would
I'm not
do the
trying
test
to state that they
at
are
the wrong
incompetent
time?
or incapable whatsoever. I'm saying that with the concern that has been shown, is there any validity to seeing if a test can be done to alleviate people's fears for this time of year? At least exploring what the costs and implications and what could be done to find out, to make people a little bit more comfortable with this going forward.
And is there anyone around the table that feels or thinks that there would be an underlying factor here that a certified professional would risk his integrity to make a false test?
I think you set a precedent if that we don't believe what the professional said.
Exactly.
I'm a professional with a professional designation and a code of conduct I have to follow. I would want you to trust what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like, I think that you're setting yourself up with a precedent that you don't want to set up. Personally.
I'll address you, I pulled up the WSSA report, so it says, based on the above information, it seems unlikely that groundwater recharge from precipitation significantly impacted groundwater levels during the pump test and recovery period. So that's after the section where they address the weather, because like I was mentioning, there is a section that gives date benchmarks, which gives parameters to go out of those based on year-over-year requirements, which was looked at by the hydrologist. I will also add that we have Lori Bickford on speed dial. So she just confirmed that the PRAC would not have the right to order another pump test. So I take back what I said earlier, my apologies. So that would have to be the town that requests that and defers the vote on the particular bylaw. But she did say that the town does not have to do third reading. So, just for clarity, and I apologize for the inconsistent information earlier.
That's all right, you're not a hydrologist.
This is true. Or a planner.
Or a planner, or an engineer.
We don't have to do a third reading.
Yeah, so because Diane was asking about like timing, so there's certain stipulations that if, but that's why I said we would not defeat the motion because it can trigger other pieces. We would not defeat the motion if the will of council was to consider a pump test. We can defer that particular vote, and council can consider another one. But to Councillor Bannister's point, the guidelines provide those dates, and do provide that clause, which the hydrologist reviewed.
Could we Could we pass the bylaws and the town do a second test in the meantime?
Do a second, like a pump test, you mean?
Not that we're requiring the developer to, but for us to do to prove to residents that it's. I don't know if I even like my own suggestion.
We could.
You need to do your third
We can
reading.
continue.
Yeah.
I think that if you were gonna do a pump test, you just delay the third reading until after the pump test. If you were gonna do that.
So I think just because I keep referencing it, I want to look up that section just so I can say it for the record as well, the full paragraph. So it's section 3.4. Pumping tests should not be conducted during groundwater recharge seasons, which have been historically occurred from October to December and mid-March to the end of May. Given changing climate conditions, these dates may fluctuate and are dependent on actual weather conditions. Pumping tests may be conducted during the dates listed above, can be clearly documented the groundwater recharge has not begun. And the province has confirmed based on their review and analysis of the study that was not a concern in this matter because the hydrology report references it. So to your question, I would say it's definitely an option. I do not think it's a prudent use of funds, quite frankly. Our recommendation stands.
I also liked that you read that because in my mind, while we're talking about the dates, like, yes, I like the use of the word historically. Climate change has changed a lot of things. So maybe those timeframes have shifted, like they have standards that they have to meet. So I like, I needed that to hear that one more time.
I don't know. Do we have another
If we
motion
don't-
on the
if we don't have a
floor?
motion
I don't think
to
there's a
amend,
motion on the
then we
floor.
continue.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, there's a motion.
Oh, no, I mean,
Second.
to amend, sorry, a motion to amend.
Yeah.
I'm just of the opinion, if the well casing's already there, to do another pump test is not an onerous ask. That being said, to not take the properly received documentation, I understand why everyone would be concerned with that particular avenue. Because people who have the reputations being stuck on the line when they put their stamp on their reports, that is valid, that is of liability associated with that. I won't dispute that fact. But I do think with a certain amount of the public input being done, that a small delay for a test is still valid to alleviate concerns of the residents in the nearby vicinity.
So John, if this, when we go to develop something else, we get concerns, are we gonna do the same thing? And what is I'm sorry, I'm referring to John. We get a reputation from developers,
Yes, of being owners. I'm not,
then,
I'm
you
not,
know, what's that going to look from the future perspective? I mean, these are valid questions to ask, no
Yes.
more than the validity of the other questions that have been asked this evening.
yes, but again, I see this a lot as being a good neighbor. To be a good neighbor, you have to be able to address the concerns of your neighbors to a point, not to do every single thing that they ask, not to cave to every demand that is being made of your neighbors, but to make reasonable accommodations where possible to alleviate people's fears before it escalates into all out feuding.
Just think that Plan 360 helped us be a good neighbor by requiring that they had that comprehensive water study done before they even brought it to us. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Before
I
the
agree.
rezoning even came, like
agree.
they made him do that step
Already.
before we saw it.
Yes, absolutely.
Just,
But to me, everyone is gonna nitpick the dates of when it was
Right.
done. And I feel that is a valid concern, that if it should stand to scrutiny, it should be able to be done reasonably this time of year. But to delay it till next August, I do not support whatsoever.
right, so what if?
I
the
am not
hydrologist
interested in
says-
slowing everything down
Yeah.
because everybody wants to have every single I dotted and T crossed.
Right.
For every little tiny aspect to delay, slow, and avoid any development.
But
That,
the i's were dotted and the t's were
I
crossed prior. to-
understand.
We're not getting a pump test done before October, so it's gonna be next year. We do not have the time. We're not doing it. Like, so it will have to wait if that's the will of council. So. And I don't know if there's a motion on the floor, so there's no motion on the floor. Right, okay.
Right.
I'm still looking for.
So do you have a motion to?
See, that's a problem to me, the fact that it would have to then therefore wait almost a full year.
No.
And that I do not like.
It just, it can be done in January.
That's next year.
Well, not in a year.
Okay,
But we're
please,
just-
Felicia McGower, the council's talking. Thank you.
I don't have a good answer for that.
I think the question now is, are you gonna make a motion to amend? I don't think the rest of us.
You either have to make a motion or we move on, one or the other. That's,
That's mom that's coming out.
yeah, well, I mean, come on, it's
I'll
10:09 and we
I'll
haven't.
let John think for a minute, but I went through and extracted like the email that we got and the petition and all of the core concerns, and there was like a number of different things. The first, like one of them being like traffic and things like that, which can be mitigated through that process, I assume. Yes. Right?
Okay, we'll look at parking.
I'm gonna just, from a whole procedural method, we do have to have a motion and a second, or then call for questions.
So we have a move, so we're still in debate. Yeah, we're still in debate on the motion, which is to approve the First Amendment. Yeah, yeah.
Water, I'll park for a second. We've been talking about water. The other one was every single email was suggesting the senior type single story.
Development.
Yes, development.
In favor.
Like at the top of McDonald's. So it doesn't sound like the residents are not for development and kind of, furthering our plans. If we need more places for whether it's seniors or young people or middle-aged people, what have you, to live. Those won't be able to be built if we don't rezone.
Correct.
So today, we're talking rezoning. We're not talking, the development agreement has not been created, correct? Has not been approved, correct?
Correct.
It's
Or
not-
drafted,
or
quite frankly,
drafted.
because we need a
So
subdivision.
the development is not currently, it has caused the rezoning.
Yes.
It is not currently approved. It's not currently moving forward. I'm just trying to get this in my head, 'cause like, it's a lot,
Yeah.
right? It's a lot. And I want to make sure, John, at this point, we're doing justice to our residents because that's why we're here. So as a zoning only, knowing that has not gone through the approval process, the public consultation process, we can't do any of what the residents have asked for without it. Because their alternative was all senior. Like, that was the alternative in every email I got. I would never drill a well in my home. Just by saying, put it here or there, like I have to rely on an expert to tell me where to put a well. And I would have to. I have to listen to what this professional hydrologist has suggested, and for me, I know the concerns with the development. The development is not approved. Am I 100% correct in that?
Correct, yeah. The rezoning has not
The
been,
re-
that's what we're talking about.
Correct, but the rezoning is one thing, which would allow for all of the things that every resident put in an email to me.
Yes. yeah.
Yes.
And I think like Melinda was saying earlier, the residential zoning, which is what it is today, could permit up to semi-detached or duplex, right? So the semi-detached is the same thing
Right.
other than their own.
So what
Each
we
side.
have an opportunity to do here, we still have some things, like I wrote down, I 100% think we should, put notices on doors for the PrAC meeting. We can do that, like that's one thing that was directly asked, that's a very thoughtful and simple thing we can do for people. But to do the residents justice and what you're saying here, zoning is one thing. We have time, because we haven't approved anything for the development, to discuss how we can mitigate some of the concerns and if there's other things we want to do.
To a certain degree, so certain things will go to the PrAC because they administer terms and conditions. So in this case, the terms and conditions will go to the PrAC for the buildings themselves, so parking, water supply, drainage, vegetation, buffers, that sort of thing. If you're talking about things like road location and land for public purpose, all of those have to be discussed by council, so there's certain
And that was like
elements.
traffic, all that stuff. There was a lot of that stuff in there too. And that'll have, like, we have process. I already know we have process to address that. I guess specifically for me is the rezoning is not approving this development. I just want to be very clear for me, in my mind. I'm making sure that I understand that by saying yes to this zoning doesn't mean we're not going to have a conversation about whether we want to do something else. Or if the developer, I'm just, if we, to John Weaver's point, if we want to discuss another potential option, the developer might just be open to us arranging a contact.
Maybe, yes. I have no idea.
That is something that we could discuss as part of that development opportunity, because it hasn't been approved.
After the zoning is done.
Like, we're just talking about rezoning, which, and I'm being 100%, every single email, if I printed them off right now, asked for everything that we need to rezone to put there, irrelevant of what's gonna go there. I just wanna make sure that we definitely hear the concerns and figure out how to, like, during that next process and next phase of talking about the development, that we're thoughtful in some of the things that were raised.
For transparency, if I'm right, this first building won't come back to us.
Correct. None of the buildings necessarily will, because those are considered terms and conditions. What will come to council is subdivision agreement, which looks at sewer location, road location, staff sign off on, street specs to municipal specifications. Council will approve land for public purpose or cash in lieu, the subdivision process.
Development can't move forward without that.
The second,
first
yeah,
building.
the first
First
one
building,
can, subject to the approval of the amendments tonight and subject to reasonable terms and conditions by the PRAC. The first one can, because it doesn't involve the subdivision of the parcel. It's still just one parcel.
So I have a question. Just assuming we approve this particular rezoning, is there any bylaws that we could enact, or could we enact a bylaw to stipulate any multi-level or multi-unit development require water testing in a, if not, just a specific bylaw for the town of Salisbury, that any multi-unit at above a
Like
certain
that.
level?
Like that, any multi-unit,
Yeah.
anything once you reach 3
same.
requires a study, which was done. Yeah. That's why the planners would not permit it to come here until that was done.
But but is that per unit? Like per each building is built?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
each building.
Every build.
Any
everything from
multi-unit
the
building.
John has to have another study.
So this is why we're saying we're protected going forward. Melinda's point is that if something happened and there was no sufficient water, that, they'd be left with a mess. And, we would want to protect that, but again, I go back to professional, certified,
Yeah, but see,
people-
we're not even to this point just yet,
No.
because this is just the zoning.
the starting of it, yes.
Which has a water study, which would be required for
Exactly.
the first one, right?
Yeah.
Like,
This is only the initial phase.
Not even.
It's not,
No, but
Yeah.
this, even to get to the first phase, this is where we're currently at.
correct.
The other thing that was mentioned was drainage, and that's one that was a concern brought up by individuals. And different than individual buildings that are being built, and there has been individual units built in that area that have had drainage issues. But Austin, if you wanted to just around drainage
the
plans,
terms and
the
conditions.
terms and conditions.
So
There are terms and conditions around drainage that would not apply necessarily to single building units that are taking place, and there has been some issues in that area where units have gone up that caused that.
the PRAC can look at drainage as a reasonable term and condition, but I'll speak to the subdivision process. So we require civil engineering drawings to be done on the road, the sewer, drainage. So it will show the ditching system, where the water will go. The engineer will not size the ditches without doing calculations to municipal specs and based on those calculations. So, yeah. And that's part of the subdivision agreement process. We could have the civil drawings for the PRAC terms and conditions. I don't know. So the PRAC may look at the full, that may be the easiest way, because the PRAC may say, okay, we're looking at one building, but if the proposed project has 5 as I don't know what they're gonna look at. But we, from the subdivision process, will look at the drawings for the full proposed street. We have to use that for a number of different elements: drainage, calculation of surety deposit, all those things.
I'm going to withdraw my concern at the moment.
So there's no amendment on the table. That's correct. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear and on, that there is still a very large thorough, thoughtful process on the development side of it, that we can address a lot of the concerns.
It depends. A lot of the building concerns will not come to council, right? Like the PRAC will look at building concerns. The rezoning facilitates that process to go to the PRAC for reasonable terms and conditions. If the developer goes building by building, then that means that it will go to the PRAC 5 times based on the proposed plan. If the developer said that they wanted to look at all 5 at once, well, then it will go to the PRAC once, but we only have 1 water study right now. So it's a safe assumption to say that the first one will be 1. The future ones, then we get into the step of, okay, it comes back to council for a subdivision agreement. I'd be in a better position then to say it will go back to the PRAC twice, 2 buildings each time, or 4 more times, 1 building at a time. That is what will come back to council. When it comes back for the subdivision agreement, council will be able to discuss certain elements, not elements that are terms and conditions that the PRAC would impose through their process. Don't know if that answers it. It makes it more complicated, but they'll look at certain things, and we'll look at the construction of the road, location of land for public purpose, or cash in lieu, essentially.
Can I just also clarify, when this goes to PRAC, they will mail a letter to every resident within 60 meters of this pit.
Yes.
One lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's from the perimeter, the outside perimeter. What? For the lot? 2 houses? Okay, so can we make an agreement, okay, that we make sure that people in the subdivision are notified?
When the PRAC meeting is?
Yes, that is very important. That's
So-
very important.
So I will say that for this one, what we will do is, given some of the sensitivities raised, we'll chat with one of the planners to see, to my knowledge, they don't have a formal date for when that will go to the PRAC. I would say we'll communicate it through the newsletter probably, like that could be an option. I'll have to confirm. What I will say though is that we can't do this with every rezoning unless we have a
You have to
policy.
go knock on everybody's door
Correct.
and,
Correct.
and
Council can.
hand deliver a letter. If that means,
Yeah.
you know, I mean.
So we,
We'll have coffee.
we, I would say like what our preference would be is that we go back to Plan 360. I'm sure other municipalities may have public notification processes or steps.
Yeah.
And if we process other rezonings and then don't do the exact same, that's my only concern. So
No, this is
yeah,
a problem.
that's my only concern.
I
You do
agree.
set a precedent.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, that's the only concern. Not to say it's not labor intensive. It's a walk that many people in this room do every day, right? Like that's not the point. It's just the precedent point. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that would be the only, but we can definitely, without direction from council, consult with Plan 360 to see, and then potentially bring something back to council for future pieces.
Mhm.
We can do our best to keep an eye on the PRAC agenda. I think they would notify us of the updates on this development for sure. And we can do our best to communicate it. It's not something we would normally do, but we can do our best to make sure that we keep an eye on the agenda and communicate it as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Good enough.
Can I just say that when Lori Bicker did her thing, she did say that the rezoning was for the purpose of the development of 5 buildings, 2 8 units and 3. It's for the whole thing.
So I don't think it's time for things from the gallery. I'll speak to it. So in any rezoning application, the town would need to know the intent of the rezoning. And so a developer could come in a situation and say, I am intending to rezone the property for multi-units. In which case the commission knows that there's things that are triggered, like water studies, and has to look at if it's even plausible or realistic. If they said they wanted to put a warehouse there for VC zoning, I would have a hard time believing the planners would recommend that to council. So they ask for things like their intended purpose and their intended hope for the property, in which case is the 5 proposed units. That's the maximum yield that would be permissible on this property if the amendments pass. So yes, like Lori mentioned, that is the proposed development that would be facilitated by the rezoning, subject to terms and conditions at the PRAC for each building, including a water study.
Because it is one property.
Correct. Yeah, it's one parcel right now. Yeah. In the end, if this whole project proceeds as proposed, it's 5 properties. Yeah.
Comprehensive wasn't done on 5
The Department of Environment, what was just.
So there's no debate on the floor.
It's supposed to be done.
Do you want a motion for,
We already moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded.
like, to call for the vote?
No questions.
did
We can-
Continue with
Yeah.
questions to the motion. Are there additional questions to the motion? Nope. No additional questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried.
So, first reading by title only, bylaw number 50-1. Bylaw number 50-1, a bylaw to amend the bylaw number 50, Village of Salisbury Municipal Plan. First reading is in full, second reading in full, August the 12th, and third reading passed this 9th day of September.
So we have a second motion now, or second recommendation, sorry, on the floor for the second amendment.
Okay, I move the council of the town of Salisbury have third reading and enactment of bylaw number 51-4. Bylaw to amend the bylaw 51 being the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw by title only.
Moved by Councilor Tory, seconded by Deputy Mayor Gallant. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried.
So bylaw number 51-4, bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. That is third reading of bylaw number 51, amendment bylaw 51-4, by title only, passed this 9th day of September.
Bylaw 91.9.1.3. Do I have somebody read the motion, please?
I'll move that council of the town of Salisbury have third reading and enactment of bylaw number 51-3, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, being the Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw by title.
Moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Tory. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried.
So third reading by title only of bylaw number 51-3 is a bylaw number 51-3, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 51, Village of Salisbury zoning bylaw. Again, first and second reading was done in full on August 12th, its third time and passed this September 9th, 2023.
Thank you. With that, we're moving into item number 10, closed session. So members of the gallery, the council has other items to address this evening, with the next being 3 scheduled items. Discuss permit closed under the Local Governance Act in light of these 2 matters. Dealing with personal land, we must have those in attendance.
And RCMP.
And RCMP up to 73 tenants, so vacate the council in the building. Council resumes public session, the meeting following these 2 items in closed, at which point the public is welcome to enter the building should they wish.
Need a motion?
I move that council, move into a closed session.
So moved by Councilor Bannister, seconded by Councilor Oblinus. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Do I have a motion to enter back into the regular council session? So moved by Councilor Tory, seconded by Councilor Thorne. Questions to the motion? We are now back in regular council session. With that, we will move on to item number 11, mayor and councilor statements and inquiries. I have nothing to report this evening. If anyone else? Nothing to report. With that, note item number 12, notices of motions and resolutions. Anything?
No, nothing.
Nothing on the agenda. With that, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Tory. Questions to the motion? Being none, all in favor? We are now adjourned. Thank you for a good meeting.